Hello students, this is Poonam teacher back with a new video of general science, and in this video we shall learn about the types of elements. Before starting this, let me remind you the definition of element. Elements are the basic substances which cannot be split into anything simpler by chemical means. And if you will notice the things around us, these things are made up of elements. That means these things are made up of basic substances, and those substances cannot be split into anything simpler by chemical means. So this is the meaning of elements. Now there are various types of elements like metals, non-metals and metalloids. There are certain properties of metals which we shall learn on the basis of this table. Now there are various objects given and there are certain questions asked that whether the surface is shining and does the shape flatten or break into small pieces on hammering. So if you take the case of iron nail being metal, it will have a shining surface because this is a property of metal that all the metals will have a shining surface, and the shape of iron nail will be flattened on hammering, and this is also a property of metals that on hammering this will be beaten into small into the flat sheets, or the shape will be flattened. So this is also a property of metals, and that property of the metal on account of which on hammering the shape will be flattened, or on account of which it can be beaten into sheets on applying the pressure, this property will be known as malleability. Then if you take copper wire is also metal because it will be having a shining surface and it will also be flattened on hammering. The same thing will happen with aluminium wire. Its surface will be shining and the shape will be flattened on hammering. But if you take a coal piece, now coal piece is nothing but it is carbon, and we all know that carbon is a non-metal. It will not have a shining surface and it will be breaking into small pieces on hammering. So this is the difference between metals and non-metals. Let me give you certain information of metalloid. That metalloid, the properties of the metalloid lies between the metals and the non-metals, or these are the elements which shows both the properties of metals and the non-metals, and such kind of elements are known as metalloid. Examples of metalloid are boron, germanium, silicon, arsenic, and so on. So like this, there are certain types of metalloids also which exhibits both the properties of metals and the non-metals. While metals we saw like iron, copper, aluminium, these are all metals. Coal piece is made up of carbon and carbon is a non-metal. So there are the difference into the properties of the metals and the non-metals. That metals have a shining surface, non-metals do not have a shining surface, they have a dull surface. Metals can be hammered into sheets, or the shape can be flattened on hammering. This property is known as malleability, while non-metals do not possess this property. Afterwards, metals can be drawn into wire. That means we can make a fine wire out of any metal. That property of the metal is known as ductility, while non-metal do not possess this property of ductility. So like this, there are various properties which differentiates a metal from a non-metal. Now let's study the types of compounds. Now there are various types of compounds like organic, inorganic and complex compound. Now let me tell you certain things about organic compounds, because we are also organisms, so we are also organic, and this organic compound contains considerable amount of carbon in themselves. So our body also made up of carbon in considerable amount, and that is why whenever even our body will be burnt or the plant's body will be burnt, it will turn into ash, or it will be turning into the carbon itself. So that is why we all are known as organism, and we all are the living organism. So the same thing can be demonstrated with the help of this experiment. In this experiment, you need to take a camphor. Camphor is an organic compound. Its molecular formula is C10H16O. It consists of considerable amount of carbon, and when that camphor will be burnt into the evaporating dish, if it is totally burnt, complete combustion of the camphor will take place, it will not leave any residue. But if incomplete combustion of this camphor will take place, it will give a black residue, and that black residue will be nothing but the carbon itself. because this camphor will consist of considerable amount of carbon. So whenever on incomplete combustion the black residue will be left, or black residue is left after the combustion, that kind of compound will be known as organic compound. And on the other hand, if you take some inorganic compound like common salt, like blue vitriol means copper sulfate, CuSO4, on heating this will not give us any black residue because it will not consist of carbon, and that is why such kind of compounds which do not contain carbon but consist of some other elements is known as inorganic compound. And in organic compound there will be presence of carbon for sure. Now let's move towards the complex compounds. In complex compound, what happens that if you take the example of chlorophyll, that is, chlorophyll is the green pigment which is found into plants and which allows the plants to perform photosynthesis, that is chlorophyll. It contains magnesium. Apart from magnesium, it will also have some molecules of carbon. And hemoglobin into our blood contains iron. Then cyanocobalamin, which is a vitamin B12, it contains cobalt. These are all complex compounds because the molecules of the compounds have a complex structure which are formed by many atoms. In the center of the structure, metal atoms are also included. So whenever the structural formula is going to be little complex, little complicated, and in the middle of that structure there will be the presence of metals, such kind of compounds will be known as complex compounds. The examples of these complex compounds are chlorophyll, hemoglobin, and vitamin B12. And types of mixture we shall study into next video. Thank you.